Welcome everybody tonight to the postgrad evening for the Masters of Writing and Publishing. I'm here tonight to tell you everything about what's happening in editing, writing and publishing, and also all about the Masters program. My name is Tracy O'Shaughnessy and I'm Program Director. Next slide. Womanjika. So before we make a start, I'd like us to think about where we're sitting tonight, because all of us typically would be in at RMIT, where we would be doing our acknowledgement to country there, but all of us are in our own separate little spaces. And so I'd like us all to have a think about where we are and think about the lands on which we are participating in this meeting. But on behalf of RMIT, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land and on which this university stands. We respectfully acknowledge the elders past, present and future, and also recognise that this land was never ceded. Thank you, and next slide. A little bit of housekeeping. So the webinar is being recorded and will be sent via email to all of those who are attending. At the end of the session, there'll be an open question and answer it'll take about 15 minutes. And we also ask you to fill out a brief survey at the end of the event. Thank you all. Next slide. Okay, so I'm really excited to be sort of talking to you about what is happening in the editing, writing and publishing field. Now, there's been lots of doom and gloom about how publishing works and how, it's the death of the industry, the death of the book, the death of, everything to do with publishing. But I'm here to tell you that one of the industries that's worked really well in this kind of weird year that we have has been the editing, writing and publishing industry. Some industry stats just to give you a little bit of buoyancy about thinking about this as a career is that at the end of September, our Nielsen Bookscan, which is the kind of national recorder of how our book stats are going, has recorded in our overall market, so that includes both our education and our trade market, there's been in value growth, so that's the dollar value, a growth of 17.1%, and in volume 12.1%. So that's a growth. Now that is really quite extraordinary and also really buoying for us in this industry. In the Masters of Writing and Publishing, you will learn lots of things. We'll talk a little bit later about the kind of industry partners that we have. We'll talk about the Bowen Street Press, which is the publishing house that's embedded in the Masters program as well. You will also learn how to do things in terms of digital publications, print publications, and across a broad spectrum of things. Next slide, please. So, why study writing, editing and publishing at RMIT? Well, a really big reason why is to do with the fact that the whole of the program is taught by professionals who have had extensive careers in book industry as well as corporate communications and also journal publishing. So one of your teachers will be me, Tracy O'Shaughnessy. I've had 25 years as a publisher in trade publishing, working with some of the great Australian publishers, Allen and Unwin, Melbourne University Press and Hardy Grant Books. So a really strong and long career in independent trade publishing. Rose Michael, who has been a journalist in her past life. She's worked in corporate communications as a speechwriter, and she's also a published writer herself, and then had some part of her career in publishing as well. And then Zoe Zanko, who is the most recent member of our team, who is a published poet, but has also had quite a lot of experience in corporate communications and also worked as the editor of The Lifted Brow for a couple of years. So you can see that the basis from which you will be taught is through a huge amount of industry knowledge and practice. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk to you about the Bowen Street Press. The Bowen Street Press is probably one of the major selling points of the Masters program. And why it's so important is because one of the things about our industry, it's all about practice. It's a practice-based craft, and understanding how that works is super important. I also have a little table here on the left that shows you the difference in the amount of hours spent doing practice-based work per week in terms of hours per week, as opposed to practice-based work that is for the other programs, so in the Bowen Street Press we do 10 hours, and then in other programs like ours it's 1.6, and then in terms of the practice-based work per semester it's 120 hours, and then for other programs it's around 19.2. You'll be amassing an amazing 480 hours of practice-based work across the degree. So that is quite an extraordinary amount of work you'll be doing. It's also really important for us to think about this program as an internship. So when you join the Bowen Street Press, you actually become part of an internship program. We run the day as an internship, so you start at 9:30 in the morning and you finish at 4:30 in the afternoon. And on that day you do a whole range of different writing, editing and publishing things around both digital content as well as paper-based books as well. So you'll also learn how to do all sorts of different skills like editing, proofreading, structural editing, content writing. You'll also work across our website and all sorts of other things like that. Next slide, please. And I thought we all like a little bit of colour, so I'm going to go through here some of the wonderful publications that we do. You'll see Forkful, the two Forkfuls on the top left-hand side of the screen. They're both food magazines that we have been producing over the last couple of years. We do one every year. Then we have The Comeback, which is the yellow book on the magazine in the middle. We do that with The Lifted Brown. It's a student-led edition of that. Then we've got all sorts of different publications, which you can see here, a huge amount of variation. So we've got zines, anthologies, we've got research papers, and we've also got industry collaborations. For example, Defiance, Feminism and Empathy. That was with Express Media VoiceWorks, and that was a book about Kat Muscat and all of her writings. Next slide, please. So the other thing that's probably really interesting is to take it from the big picture through to a student experience. So Jack Khalil was one of our students. He is in his final semester at the moment, and you can see how Jack, if we look at his career trajectory in the white panel and start down at the bottom, we see that his first role was as an intern, a production and editorial intern at Vice. He then worked at the Professional Writing and Editing Vocational Education RMIT Visible Inc. And then he went on to Express Media's VoiceWorks, where he got some experience as part of their editorial committee. He then worked with John Marsden and Hachette as a judge on their prize. He then got, through the master's program, an editorial internship with Meanjin, and then started to do his own work as at the Multidisciplinary Digital Institute, getting some experience proofreading. Then moved into a Meanjin proofreader's role, where he finally received a job at the Australian Book Review, a very prestigious job at the Australian Book Review as a digital editor. So it's incredibly interesting to see how Jack went from a production intern, and along with everything else he was learning in the Bowen Street Press, and if you read his quote, he talks about how that real world kind of publishing experience that he got in the BSP enabled him to take these further roles. Next slide, please. Also too, we work with a lot of extraordinary industry partners. So I'm not going to talk about all of these, but some of the ones that I do want to talk about is the Garrett. So that we work with Astrid Edwards, who is the principal at the Garrett, and we do a series of podcasts. So we're really interested in content in all forms, and it's really about storytelling. So we produce a range of podcasts that you can hear on the Bowen Street Press website. We also work with the Australian Publishers Association. We produce a Frankfurt catalogue for them every year, and that's a really fun and exciting project because we get to see what's happening in the Australian book industry. Rabbit is a non-fiction poetry journal where we do 2 to 3 journals every year and a range of individual Rabbit poetry journals for individual poets. We work with the Emerging Writers Festival doing an amazing Gazette, which is a daily newspaper of the Emerging Writers Festival, and that's an extraordinary learning experience. And then we also work with Street, who is a not-for-profit that is all about giving young offenders real-world experience in hospitality and food preparation and cooking. And we've been working with them for a year, doing all of their socials and also creating content for all sorts of other things for them. Next slide, please. This is just one insight into a book publishing industry profile that we did. So we produced this book, the Bowen Street Press produced this book from scratch. We did all the interviewing, writing, editing and the design and production, and we put all of this together in this fantastic thing. And as you'll read from Mark Madden, the chair of the Fitzroy Learning Network, it's really been a transformative experience for the RMIT student interns, but also an amazing thing for the Fitzroy Learning Network to have, and it's had a real impact on their community. So that's wonderful. Next slide, please. Now, you'll all be interested in as to where you all will get jobs. What does that look like? So if you look at the Trade and Educational Publishing, really that list is a who's who of publishers in Melbourne, and they're basically, that shows you that students from the Masters of Writing and Publishing are very successful in getting positions in all of these separate organisations. You can also see that we are able to transfer our skills into both print and digital magazines and media. So there's a really exciting list of places where students have been placed in the print and digital, and then the corporate and not-for-profits as well. So what this slide really shows you is that if you learn these skills, these editing and writing skills, and you become good at them, you can actually transfer those skills across any kind of industry that requires content in any way, shape or form. And remember that we also do digital and podcasting. Next slide. And what do we do? What do our graduates do? Well, they do all sorts of things, but here are just a couple of lists of different types of roles that they've had. So publishing assistant, editor, editorial assistant, etc. Content manager, content developer, content writer, copywriter, communications consultant, coordinator. There's all sorts of different opportunities here. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about the structure of the course, which you may want to know. So you can see down on in year 1, the Foundation for Bowen Street Press, Development for Bowen Street Press, and in year 2, Production at Bowen Street Press and Entrepreneurship at Bowen Street Press. So the Bowen Street Press forms the backbone of the program. And sitting next to that are a whole range of subjects that give you the skills and knowledge that you need to do the work in the Bowen Street Press, like the craft of writing and editing and the art of writing and editing, as well as contemporary writing and publishing, and then there's the research subjects, which are the final capstone subjects in second year. Just one next slide, please. And the master's program is full-time duration, 2 years, part-time 4 years. It's on campus, but also online enabled. We've been online all this year. Intakes both February and July. The thing that I would like to point out, though, too, is that we do have a grad dip exit point. So one of the things that I really encourage is that people look at the first year of the masters and think about whether or not the grad dip is the right time for them to have a break from the masters program, and then go out and see if they can find a job and then come back and complete it later. Next slide, please. Okay, that's everything for the presentation. Now what I'm going to do is talk to you with some questions that have been coming through. So the first question is, how will a Masters help me develop my writing skills over, say, the TAFE course? Okay, so professional writing and editing, which is it's the vocational education course that we have. Quite often that's a pathway for you. So many of our students have done professional writing and editing, then moved into the creative writing degree, and then come into the master's program. So it's a pathway. It's different because really the master's program has 480 hours of that practice-based thing that you wouldn't get, for example, in the TAFE course. The TAFE course can be really recommended for people who want to specialise in particular genres of writing, so children's books or fiction. We tend to be a little bit broader in the way that we approach writing. How are students currently learning in lockdown? Well, we've been doing everything online. Publishing is a particular industry that actually works a lot online, but yes, the ideal thing is that we will be returning into the classroom in 2021. So we are all absolutely looking forward to that. Are there any opportunities to engage with any publishers? Yes. So we are engaged with publishers on a mentoring basis. So we have publishers coming in all the time, talking to us, looking at the kind of work that we're producing, thinking about our marketing ideas and our publishing ideas, and they come in and work with us on panels. Contemporary writing and publishing is entirely panel-based subject, where we have people from all facets and areas of the writing and publishing community coming in and doing seminars with us. So there's all sorts of different ways you can engage with publishers. Can you get exemptions if you did a writing or journalism degree in undergraduate? So yes, there is a 48 credit point automatic exemption that comes in for anyone who's had a cognate discipline undergraduate degree. However, we also like to talk to those people because the skill sets that you get in the Masters Writing and Publishing are particularly aimed at this industry, and so quite often you shouldn't forego those credit points because the value you get out of being in the Bowen Street Press can potentially outweigh that. But that is something that we would do with you sitting down and looking at what you've learned in your undergraduate degree and sort of thinking about that from an academic sort of advice point of view. Okay. Now, the next question is, can I take electives from other parts of the university as part of this course? The Masters of Writing and Publishing has been designed particularly where most subjects are actually core to the program. We do sometimes do variations on our program maps depending on the experience that the individual learner has had. So we really have to think quite carefully about that and making sure that we are thinking about you as an individual. So we think about what you have already learned, what you've learned in the program, where you see yourself and where you want to be, and are there any gaps that either other programs can fill or that we need to think about filling for you. So rather than electives, is sometimes we do enrolment variations based on what experience you guys might need. So I think at that point I have answered all the questions that are currently sitting in the chat. Are there any other questions for anyone? No, I think that is all good. So thank you so much for listening to the presentation. I hope you've learned lots about the Masters of Writing and Publishing, and please email me if you have any further queries. Thanks so much.